Chapter 1: The Pattern No One Wanted to See. It started with noise. At least, that's what everyone thought at first: background static, the kind of digital flutter that plagues deep space observations when cosmic rays hit sensitive instruments. But on August 18, the Chilean Las Campanas Observatory registered something that didn't behave like noise. Over a 6-hour exposure of what should have been an ordinary cometary object, catalogued then only as C/2025 P2, Atlas, a pattern began to repeat in the data. A pulse, consistent, methodical, repeating every 173 seconds with uncanny precision. At first, it seemed trivial. The night sky is full of flickers, rotating asteroids, satellites, instrument drift. But postdoctoral researcher Dr. Alina Kerr noticed something that made her stop mid-analysis. The pulse frequency wasn't changing with the object's distance from Earth. For a natural light curve, especially from a tumbling icy body, you'd expect subtle variations, rotational wobble, outgassing irregularities, spin axis precession. But not this. Not a perfect metronome beating through cosmic silence. When Kerr published her preliminary paper to AR14, the title was understated. Photometric stability and anomalous modulation in the 3I/Atlas light curve. Buried in the data appendix was the part that made senior astronomers uneasy. The signal's harmonic ratio, 1:2:4, a mathematical sequence rarely seen in nature, but omnipresent in engineered systems, from radio transmitters to orbital beacons. The response from the community was immediate and dismissive. Reddit threads called it Lobe 2.0. Senior astrophysicists at Caltech and Harvard quietly told reporters it was probably thermal calibration drift. But they all read the paper. Every single one of them. And a few weeks later, when the ESA solar orbiter passed within range and recorded the same pulsing rhythm, using entirely different instruments, the whispers began. The data was clean. Too clean. By early September, Avi Loeb, once ridiculed for his claims about Oumuamua, returned to the public stage. He wrote a short blog entry titled, "The Rhythm of the Stranger." In it, he didn't declare 3I/Atlas artificial. He simply pointed out what everyone else was trying not to say. Nature is rarely this precise. He noted the object's albedo, unusually high even for metallic asteroids, 0.72, reflecting nearly 3/4 of the light that hit it. That alone was strange enough. But the real anomaly came from its trajectory. When orbital calculations were refined using data from multiple observatories, something became clear and deeply unsettling. 3I/Atlas wasn't plunging through the solar system on a chaotic vector from deep interstellar space. Its path aligned within 5 degrees of the ecliptic plane, the invisible disk where all our planets orbit. That's not where random visitors travel. That's where watchers would. Loeb ran the numbers. The odds of a purely natural, randomly incoming interstellar object arriving so closely aligned to our planetary plane were about 2%, and that was before factoring in its velocity vector and timing. The probability dropped to less than 1 in 1,000. At the European Southern Observatory, a quiet internal memo circulated on September 10. T used language that no one in the astrophysics world had dared use since Oumuamua. Non-gravitational acceleration detected. Directionally consistent. Magnitude exceeds modeled outgassing by factor of 3.7. In plain English, it was moving as if something was adjusting its course. The simplest explanation was outgassing, jets of sublimating ice acting like miniature thrusters. But those jets should be random, chaotic, tumbling the object as they fired. Instead, 3I/Atlas remained perfectly stable, its spin axis unwavering. Someone suggested a magnetic effect, solar-wind interaction. Another suggested it was coincidence. But after the 5th independent dataset confirmed the same vector alignment, coincidence stopped being a comforting word. By mid-September, the Hubble Space Telescope was tasked for high-resolution imaging. what it captured only deepened the riddle. Instead of a diffuse coma, the misty halo of dust and vapor that all comets develop, 3I/Atlas showed a faint geometric glow. It wasn't random. It was symmetrical. Almost hexagonal. Kerr called Loeb in the middle of the night. He listened in silence as she described the shape, the pattern, the repeating pulse that wouldn't go away. Finally, he said, quietly, "It's not behaving like a comet." And she replied, equally quiet, "Then what is it behaving like?" Neither of them answered. At a closed-door session of the IAU Minor Planet Center the following week, scientists debated whether to rename it. Some argued for maintaining the C/prefix, comet. Others proposed an interstellar designation, 3I. But one astrophysicist from JPL reportedly muttered something that froze the room. "If it's maneuvering, it's not an I either. It's not interstellar. It's interested." No one laughed. The headlines that followed were tame: "Mystery object baffles astronomers, comet with a pulse." But behind the scenes, observation time on major telescopes was being quietly reassigned. Private aerospace companies, especially those with classified satellite capabilities, started monitoring the object's infrared emissions. They wanted to know one thing. Was it just reflecting sunlight, or producing its own? By late September, the pulse amplitude doubled. The solar gate. By the end of September, 3I/Atlas had crossed the orbit of Venus. Its velocity was now climbing past 210,000 kilometers per hour, closing in on the sun like an arrow that refuses to miss. But something about that trajectory, something buried deep in the equations, was starting to trouble even the most grounded astrophysicists. The math didn't lie. If 3I/Atlas continued on its current path, it should have slingshot around the sun and escaped back into the darkness between the stars. That's what gravity does. That's what nature does. But the latest tracking data suggested something else entirely, something that didn't fit any known gravitational model. Its curve wasn't open like a comet's parabolic flight path. It was tightening. Slightly, subtly, but unmistakably. The orbital modelers called it trajectory damping. Loeb had another term for it: the solar gate. At a small meeting in Cambridge, he explained the idea to a group of skeptical astronomers. He drew it on a whiteboard, a simple line, sweeping around the sun. Then, at the moment of closest approach, perihelion, he added a single mark, a vector pointing opposite to motion. "If it fires retrograde here," he said, "even a short impulse, a few meters per second, it can lose just enough energy to remain bound. It would stay in the inner solar system indefinitely. That's what we call a gravitational capture." Someone laughed softly. "Are you suggesting it's breaking?" Loeb didn't smile. "I'm saying it could." The room went quiet. Because everyone there knew the numbers. The energy required for such a maneuver, even for something the size of Manhattan, wasn't absurd. Not if it had an onboard power source. Not if it wasn't just ice and dust. The mechanics of a miracle. In physics, timing is everything. A precisely timed thrust, applied at the bottom of a gravity well, the deepest point in a star's field, can multiply its effect by orders of magnitude. Human spacecraft have used this trick for decades, performing tiny engine burns at periapsis to alter their orbits. The sun's gravity well is the deepest in the solar system. At perihelion, 3I/Atlas would reach its maximum speed, nearly 25,000 kilometers per second relative to the sun. A perfectly timed impulse, even minimal, could redirect it completely. And if that happened, 3I/Atlas wouldn't be leaving. It would be staying. Astronomers began referring to the idea, half-jokingly, as parking at the sun. But no one was laughing for long. Because when the ESA's solar orbiter recorded infrared anomalies on 3I/Atlas's sunward side, heat signatures inconsistent with simple solar heating, the humor died instantly. It looked like the object was absorbing energy in a patterned distribution, almost as if panels or surfaces were reorienting themselves toward the sun. It wasn't spinning randomly anymore. It was stabilizing. And every model that assumed natural behavior started to break down. The blind spot. The timing of all this couldn't have been worse. On October 29th, 3I/Atlas would reach perihelion, the moment of truth. But from Earth's perspective, it would be directly behind the sun, hidden from every major telescope and instrument. A total blackout. Even SOHO and Parker Solar Probe, humanity's best sentinels near the sun, wouldn't be able to capture continuous data during that window. Radiation interference, solar glare, and communication dropouts would make observation impossible. It was as if the universe, or something else, had chosen that specific geometry to hide the main act. "We won't see what it does," Loeb said during a late-night live stream, the glow of his monitor reflected in his glasses. "We'll only see what it's done when it comes out the other side." The anomaly deepens. By early October, the Deep Space Network had begun tracking minute fluctuations in the object's reflected radio spectrum. "Could be interference," one JPL engineer said. "Or it could be deliberate modulation," another whispered. The room fell silent. Meanwhile, at the Vera Rubin Observatory, long-exposure imaging revealed faint trails of dust streaming from the object. That part was normal. What wasn't normal was the direction, sunward. Comet tails never point toward the sun. They're pushed away by solar wind and radiation pressure. Always away. But this tail was bending back, against the flow. Like thrust exhaust. That single image circulated quietly among observatories, government agencies, and private aerospace companies. No one released it to the public. Not yet. The hypothesis no one dared publish. Behind closed doors, the solar trap theory evolved into something more radical, the solar gate hypothesis. Not just a gravitational braking maneuver, but an intentional use of the sun's immense energy as a power source or staging point. If 3I/Atlas were some form of probe, it might be performing a stellar slingshot not to leave, but to harvest. Solar radiation as fuel. Gravitational potential as a mechanism for control. A civilization that mastered that balance could move effortlessly between systems, using stars themselves as engines. And now one might be doing exactly that, in ours. The uncertainty window. NASA announced that due to solar conjunction, tracking data would be unavailable from October 27 to November 16. 3 weeks of blindness. 3 weeks during which anything could happen. When it re-emerges, the entire world will be watching. Every telescope, every radar dish, every deep space antenna will be listening. If its trajectory shifts, even slightly, the solar gate hypothesis will be confirmed. And the implications will be enormous. But for now, all humanity can do is wait, staring at a patch of sky where an object the size of Manhattan is racing toward the heart of the sun. Some call it a comet. Others call it a visitor. But deep down, even the skeptics know. Nature doesn't plan. It doesn't hide behind the sun. It doesn't pulse with the precision of a machine. Whatever 3I/Atlas is, we're about to find out. And when the sun swallows it from view on October 29th, one thought will echo across observatories worldwide. If it's not gone when it comes back, it was never just passing through. The probability abyss. The waiting began. And in science, waiting is the hardest part. As the sun swallowed 3I/Atlas from view, the data stream went dark. No new telemetry. No optical updates. Only silence, filled with speculation. To the public, it was just another comet. But inside observatories, data centers, and space agency backrooms, the absence of data felt louder than any signal. The silent window. On October 29, 2025, the day of perihelion, a deep quiet settled across the scientific community. The object was now less than 20 million kilometers from the Sun, a zone so hostile that even the most heat-shielded probes struggle to survive. Solar radiation flared violently that week. One coronal mass ejection swept through the heliosphere, disrupting communication across half the deep space network. It was as if the Sun itself didn't want anyone watching. NASA's official feed posted a brief update. 3I/Atlas currently unobservable due to solar interference. Tracking will resume once it exits conjunction. But the private channels told a different story. Engineers monitoring radio reflections from the Parker Solar Probe noticed a faint rhythmic oscillation in the background noise. It wasn't a data stream. It wasn't telemetry. It was a pulse. Slow. Steady. Measured. Repeating every 46 seconds. No one claimed it was related. No one dared to. But it was there. The equation that shouldn't exist. Meanwhile, at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, Loeb's team kept refining their orbital models. They ran thousands of Monte Carlo simulations, randomized versions of 3I/Atlas's orbit with small perturbations to account for gravitational uncertainties, solar wind, and radiation pressure. After 40,000 runs, the results were statistically impossible. 98.7% of all simulated outcomes predicted a gravitational capture, the object staying within the inner solar system. Only 1.3% predicted escape. Natural comets do not behave that way. Their orbits are chaotic, their outcomes unpredictable. Yet here was an interstellar body behaving with precision engineering. It wasn't drifting through space. It was choosing. Loeb didn't say that aloud, not yet, but his notes did. In the margin of his calculations, he wrote 3 words. Guided probability bias. The signal that shouldn't be there. On November 3, as the blackout continued, the Allen Telescope Array in California picked up a faint transmission buried in the solar noise. It wasn't a message in any human sense, no modulation, no code, just a narrow-band spike repeating every 46 seconds, matching the anomaly Parker had recorded days earlier. The spike originated near the solar limb, precisely where 3I/Atlas was expected to emerge in a week. For 6 hours, the signal persisted. Then it stopped. SETI researchers archived the data quietly. Officially, they labeled it instrumental artifact due to solar reflection. Unofficially, some of them stayed in the lab all night, staring at the waveform, that eerie, mechanical rhythm, steady as a heartbeat. The probability abyss. In astrophysics, everything is built on probability. Gravity doesn't decide, it calculates. Thermodynamics doesn't choose, it averages. But what happens when an event starts defying those averages, one after another? When every random variable bends toward intent. Physicists have a term for this, the probability abyss. A point where natural randomness collapses into pattern, where statistics lose meaning. By November 7, 3I/Atlas had defied enough odds to enter that abyss. Its light curve, the way it reflected sunlight, was too stable. Its mass distribution, inferred from rotation, too uniform. Even its dust emissions, normally chaotic, pulsed in geometric intervals. There was no chaos left. Only rhythm. And rhythm means design. The media storm. When the European Southern Observatory accidentally leaked part of a tracking document to a science journalist, the world finally took notice. The document mentioned non-gravitational acceleration consistent with sustained thrust. Within hours, headlines exploded. Alien probe using the sun as a power source. Astronomers detect unnatural maneuver in deep space object 3I/Atlas. Harvard physicist suggests controlled flight near the sun. Loeb went on camera the next day, visibly exhausted. "I'm not saying it's artificial," he told reporters. "I'm saying it's acting as if it were." That quote went viral. And just like that, 3I/Atlas became not just a comet, but a global phenomenon. The divide. Inside the scientific community, a Cold War began. NASA and ESA released cautious statements emphasizing natural explanations, outgassing, asymmetric heating, pressure jets. But even their models didn't fully explain the trajectory. Private groups like the Galileo Project and Breakthrough Listen began coordinating independent observations. They didn't trust the official channels anymore. Every hour of missing data only fueled the suspicion that something was being withheld. Forums filled with theories. It's a probe using the sun as a recharge point. It's mapping solar output for unknown reasons. It's part of a larger fleet. Even seasoned astrophysicists, trained to doubt, began whispering in hallways. What if it's waiting? The emergence countdown. November 12th. 3 days before 3I/Atlas was expected to reappear from behind the sun. Every telescope capable of handling solar glare was prepped and calibrated. Amateurs across the world pointed their cameras at dawn skies, ready to catch the first glint of light. Deep within NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, tracking software awaited a ping, a reflection, a flicker, a hint that the object had survived the solar inferno. No one knew what to expect. Would it continue outbound, as a normal comet should? Would it slow down, turn, or vanish entirely? At that point, every possibility felt equally unreal. Loeb, speaking quietly to a small podcast late that night, summed it up in a single line that would echo across the internet. "We're about to find out whether we've been watching a rock or a decision." The return. November 15, 2025. For 17 days, 3I/Atlas had been hidden behind the sun. 17 days of static, speculation, and sleepless nights. Now, just before dawn, the first signals began to return. The sun's glare had finally eased, and telescopes across 3 continents pointed toward the eastern limb of the sky, the region where the interstellar traveler should emerge. No one said it aloud, but everyone felt it. This was the moment of truth. The first glint. At 4:16 Universal Time Coordinated, the Vera C. Rubin Observatory in Chile recorded something. A faint, sharp flicker, magnitude 8.9, far brighter than expected. Then, another pulse, exactly 47 seconds later. At first, the system flagged it as an error. But then Pan-STARRS in Hawaii reported the same pattern. 2 observatories. Same timing. Same pulse. Whatever 3I/Atlas had done behind the sun, it was signaling now. The light that shouldn't exist. When the first composite images arrived, the difference was unmistakable. Before perihelion, 3I/Atlas had a classic cometary look, diffuse, unstable, shedding mass. Now, it appeared refined, almost structured. Its coma was perfectly symmetrical, with a sharp boundary layer instead of a chaotic dust cloud. The tail, once jagged and uneven, was gone. Instead, a faint halo of ionized gas surrounded the core, glowing in narrow spectral bands centered around 530.3 nanometers, the forbidden line of oxygen. That emission shouldn't have been visible. Not unless something inside the object was exciting the gas in a controlled way. It wasn't reflecting sunlight anymore. It was generating light. The trajectory shift. When trajectory data finally stabilized, every computer model in NASA's database flagged an anomaly. The object wasn't escaping. It was slowing down. Instead of following the predictable outbound curve of a slingshot orbit, 3I/Atlas had bent its path inward, just slightly, enough to enter a bound elliptical orbit between Mercury and Earth. For the first time in history, an interstellar object had been captured by the sun. Astronomer Clara Zhou at JPL was the first to say it out loud. It didn't pass through our system, it parked. That single sentence spread like wildfire across encrypted internal chats and academic servers. Because parking meant intent. And intent meant design. The pattern in the pulse. By the evening of November 15th, radio telescopes worldwide had locked onto the recurring 47-second signal. At first, it looked random, bursts of radio energy at millimeter wavelengths. But when the Green Bank telescope ran a Fourier analysis, something emerged beneath the noise. A harmonic sequence. Precisely spaced frequency intervals. Ratios consistent with prime numbers. No natural astrophysical process produces repeating prime sequences. That was the kind of structure used in mathematical beacons, the kind civilizations might use to say, "We exist." The data wasn't public. Not yet. But everyone who saw it understood the same thing. Whatever 3I/Atlas was, it had just spoken the universal language of intelligence, mathematics. The global reaction. By November 16th, the story had exploded across every media outlet on Earth. CNN, NHK, BBC, Al Jazeera, all running the same headline. 3I/Atlas emerges, and it's slowing down. Markets wavered. Religions reacted. World leaders demanded classified briefings. NASA and ESA scheduled an emergency joint conference. Their statement was careful, measured, but the implication was unmistakable. The observed deceleration and luminosity pattern of 3I/Atlas cannot be fully explained by current cometary models. Further observation is ongoing. Translation: we have no idea what's happening. The shape revealed. 3 days later, as 3I/Atlas moved further from the Sun and into clearer observation, the James Webb Space Telescope finally managed to capture a direct infrared profile. The image stunned even the most skeptical. The object's core wasn't spherical. It was elongated, roughly 800 meters long and 120 meters wide, with flat planes and uniform edges, features nature almost never produces on that scale. Surface reflectivity alternated between high and low albedo regions in precise intervals, a pattern repeating every 240 meters. It looked like panels. Segmented. Structured. Loeb whispered as he viewed the raw data. It's not a rock. It's architecture. The orbital silence. Then, on November 18th, something stranger happened. The 47-second pulse stopped. Completely. No signal. No emission. Nothing. For 11 hours, 3I/Atlas drifted silently across the void, motionless relative to its new orbit, almost as if it were waiting. At 3:07 Universal Time Coordinated, it emitted a single, narrowband transmission in the hydrogen line, 1420.40575 MHz, the frequency SETI researchers had long theorized any intelligent species would use. The signal lasted 12 seconds. Then it vanished forever. It wasn't directed at Earth. It was aimed outward, toward deep interstellar space. The message nobody heard. When the data reached the Deep Space Network, decoding teams found a short modulation sequence, brief, geometric, and non-repeating. It wasn't a message in any human sense. It was more like a ping. A location marker. As if 3I/Atlas had just announced, "I'm here." To someone else. The day humanity understood. By the end of November, 3I/Atlas had settled into a stable orbit just inside Venus's path, a region humans had never placed a satellite in before. It reflected sunlight in pulses, perfectly timed, every sunrise. No more, no less. It wasn't random. It wasn't drifting. It was doing something. And though scientists debated the meaning endlessly, the truth felt heavier than theory. For the first time in human history, something not from the solar system had arrived, and decided to stay. It came through fire, Loeb said in his final briefing that year, staring at the orbit projection glowing on his monitor. It used the sun, the very heart of our system, to slow down. That's not navigation. That's understanding. He paused, his voice quiet. And if it understands our sun, then it understands us. The silent orbit. December 2025. The world had stopped pretending that 3I/Atlas was a comet. Every telescope, every observatory, every intelligence agency had turned its gaze toward the small, brilliant object now drifting silently between the orbits of Venus and Earth, a region no natural body had ever chosen to remain in. It wasn't leaving. It wasn't moving randomly. It was waiting. The stillness. For weeks, it held its position with a precision that defied gravity. No tumbling. No outgassing jets. No tail. Just a steady, impossible stability. As if it were balanced on an invisible thread of mathematics. The orbital models showed something uncanny. Its motion corrected itself subtly, every 17 hours, matching shifts in solar wind pressure. The adjustments were too small to see visually, but the telemetry didn't lie. Something aboard 3I/Atlas was making microcorrections. It wasn't passive. It was active. The listening post hypothesis. By mid-December, Avi Loeb and his colleagues at Harvard released a quiet internal paper, Interstellar Object 3I/Atlas, a probabilistic assessment of non-natural stability. It wasn't meant for public release, but it leaked within hours. In it, Loeb proposed a new term. Gravitational station-keeping artifact. He compared the object to a solar probe, but one designed to listen instead of to transmit. He argued that its position, between Earth and Venus, wasn't arbitrary. From there, it could observe both inner planets continuously, using reflected sunlight and radio emissions to gather information. In his words, if you wanted to study a young, noisy civilization without direct interference, this orbit would be ideal. The signal we missed. On December 19th, a team from the Square Kilometre Array Pathfinder in Australia found something buried in archived data from November, a second, weaker transmission from 3I/Atlas, emitted 5 hours after the main hydrogen line ping. It was so faint that the original system had dismissed it as thermal noise. But after noise reduction, a pattern emerged, a repeating triangular waveform, increasing in frequency every 1.618 seconds. The golden ratio. No known natural process emits signals with Fibonacci modulation. It was too deliberate, too elegant. The human reaction. By Christmas Eve, panic and wonder had become inseparable. News networks played looping animations of the object's orbit like a countdown clock. Religious leaders called it the Watcher. Markets stabilized, not because of reassurance, but because people had stopped caring about markets. For the first time in modern history, global attention was synchronized, billions of minds focused on a single point of light between two planets. It was as if humanity itself had gone silent, waiting for the next move. The attempt to speak. On December 27th, NASA, ESA, and JAXA launched Project Echo, a coordinated transmission attempt directed at 3I/Atlas. Using the combined power of the Goldstone Deep Space Network and Arecibo's digital array, they beamed a simple binary message. A sequence of prime numbers, chemical formulas for hydrogen, oxygen, carbon, and finally, a digital image of Earth. The transmission lasted 3 minutes. The response never came. The change. But 3 days later, December 30th, something changed. The brightness of 3I/Atlas began to pulse again. Not in the previous 47-second rhythm, but in a new one. Every 3 minutes and 12 seconds. The same duration as the human transmission. At first, it seemed like coincidence. But after the fourth cycle, the timing synced perfectly with the message's arrival window at its orbit. It wasn't coincidence. It was acknowledgement. The object had heard. And it was thinking. The silence before the signal. Then, nothing. 4 weeks. January arrived, and with it, a growing sense of unease. Every instrument stayed trained on that orbit. Every astrophysicist on Earth waited for the next pulse, the next word, the next sign. But 3I/Atlas remained motionless, quiet, suspended in an eternal pause between two worlds. The world began calling it the Sentinel. Loeb's final statement. Avi Loeb's final public interview that winter wasn't about equations or trajectories. It was about philosophy. Standing under a cold Cambridge sky, he said quietly, "If it came here to watch, then perhaps it's waiting to see if we're worth speaking to. Maybe silence is a test. Maybe it's the only test that matters." He looked up at the faint dot on the horizon, invisible to the naked eye but burned into every human imagination. The question now isn't whether it's intelligent. The question is whether we are. The dawn. On January 7, 2026, as the sun rose over the Pacific, amateur astronomers in Japan noticed something new. A faint line of light, thin as a thread, extended from 3I/Atlas, pointing outward toward the stars. Not toward Earth. Not toward the sun. But toward interstellar space. Within hours, the signal vanished. The object's orbit remained stable. No motion. No response. Only that one act, a luminous gesture. As if marking a direction for someone, or something, to follow. Epilogue, the watcher remains. Months later, as the world adapted to the idea that an interstellar artifact shared our system, a quiet understanding settled over humanity. 3I/Atlas had not attacked. It had not spoken. It had simply arrived. And in its silence, it had changed everything. Scientists called it a gravitational anomaly. Philosophers called it a mirror. The rest of the world simply called it the Watcher. Because for the first time, we weren't sure who was watching whom. "The sky used to make us feel alone," Loeb wrote in his last journal entry. "Now it makes us feel observed." Maybe that's progress. Maybe that's how contact truly begins, not with a voice, but with a silence so deep it forces us to listen to ourselves. The long silence. The year 2030. 5 years have passed since 3I/Atlas entered orbit between Earth and Venus. 5 years without a single sound. Without an impulse. Without a sign of life. It just hung in the void, like a frozen point of light reflecting a ray of sunlight. A reminder of something that humanity still cannot explain. But the world has changed. Not because of what he said. It was because he was silent. The age of observation. Immediately after the events of 2026, dozens of space agencies, private laboratories, and universities joined forces in a new project, the Atlas Initiative. His task was not just to observe the object, but to understand what he was observing. Several probes were launched into the orbit of Venus, Solstice 1, Kibo and Horizon Array. They were supposed to approach 3I/Atlas on a spiral trajectory, transmitting millions of terabytes of data, spectral analyses, magnetic fields, gravitational deviations. But whenever the devices approached closer than 5,000 kilometers, their communication systems began to jam with strange noise, broadband modulation. Unlike either natural interference or solar flares. And always, a few minutes before the shutdown, a short pulse appeared in their sensors in the range of 1,420 MHz. The same one that was once called the language of space. After that, the devices stopped responding. Their orbits remained stable, but they were silent, as if someone had just turned them off. The human shift. By 2028, the interest of the masses had faded. The news didn't talk about 3I/Atlas anymore. He became part of the background, like the moon, like the stars. Just another object in the sky that the telescopes are looking at. But in academic circles, he became a symbol of a new trend, philosophical astrobiology. The scientists stopped asking who was there. They started asking why he was silent. Avi Loeb was no longer teaching. He lived off the coast of Massachusetts, in a small house with an observatory dome on the. Sometimes he went on the air at conferences, but he didn't talk about science, but about humility. Silence is also a language, he said. Maybe they've already said everything, we just don't know how to listen without expectations. The first shadow. In August 2029, the Solstice 2 probe, launched by the Japanese Space Agency, entered orbit 2,000 kilometers from 3I/Atlas. This time, the connection was not interrupted. But the images he transmitted were not what was expected. A thin field of reflection appeared around the object. Not visible in normal light, but bright in the infrared range. It was as if 3I/Atlas was surrounded by a transparent shell that reacted to solar radiation. Not reflecting it, but redirecting it. This field oscillated at a frequency of 7.83 Hz. The same as the Schumann resonance, the natural rhythm of the Earth. The resonance theory. This discovery shocked the scientific community. It turned out that the object was tuned to the frequency of the planet itself. He's not just listening to the cosmos, he's listening to the Earth. Radio engineers found that at certain points of the day, especially during thunderstorms and bursts of the magnetosphere, 3I/Atlas reacts with microscopic amplitude radiation, as if repeating the electric echo of our planet in space. It reflects us, Loeb said in an interview with Nature. Not in a metaphorical sense. It literally reflects the Earth's signature back into space. It's like someone is using our own voice to tell the world that we are here. The philosophical divide. Humanity is divided into two camps. Some, supporters of the ECHO project, believed that it was necessary to send a new signal. Not just mathematical, but human, sounds, language, music, paintings. They wanted to show that we are not just a technological civilization, but a civilization of feelings. Others, led by the Silence Protocol group, argued that it was reckless. If someone is watching, then silence is protection. And 3I/Atlas is not a messenger, but a sensor. A part of the network that is better not to disturb. The UN held a hearing. The vote was split exactly in half. The ECHO 2 project has been postponed indefinitely. The shift in the sky. In the spring of 2030, something happened that no one expected. Within 1 week, 3I/Atlas changed its brightness in the range of 15%. Astronomers called it a phase event. The changes followed a clearly repeating cycle, 19 hours and 27 minutes. This is how long the average human sleep cycle lasts. Someone at NASA said, "He sleeps with us." The awakening. And then, on the night of June 21, 2030, during the summer solstice, 3I/Atlas burst into flames. For a few seconds, it became brighter than Venus. And then, a simultaneous pulse passed through all frequencies, from radio waves to the gamma range. All over the Earth. No noise. Not a message. Just a clear, perfect tone. 12 seconds long. The same signal that was in November 2025. Only now, more powerfully, closer, more consciously. After that, the 3I/Atlas went out again. Completely. The last transmission. 2 days later, at 4:03 Universal Time Coordinated. All SETI receiving stations recorded a short transmission at 1420 MHz. The signal lasted 3.1415 seconds. Pi. A repeating pattern was found inside the waveform. A square, a triangle, a circle. 3 simplest forms that describe everything. Matter, energy, and orbit. Then silence. Forever. The legacy. In 2031, the UN officially recognized 3I/Atlas as a space phenomenon of unknown origin. Not a threat, not an artifact, not a comet. Just by being there. Since then, humanity has been living with this presence. Just as it does with the ocean, thunder, or time. No one is trying to understand him anymore. But every morning, when at dawn it flashes like a cold dot between Venus and the sun. Millions of people look up. And for a moment they feel that someone is there, looking back. Silence is a form of communication, Loeb wrote in a recent essay. If 3I/Atlas wanted to tell us that we are not alone, then he said it in the most humane way of all. He just stayed. The first contact. Year 2085. 55 years have passed since 3I/Atlas entered orbit between Earth and Venus. He's still there, motionless, quiet, eternal. Generations have changed, entire nations have disappeared. But he has remained, as a symbol of what we have not understood. The world is different now. Space has become habitable. People live on the moon, mine ice on Ceres, and build orbital cities above Mars. Technology has allowed us to look further, to feel deeper. But even with all this, Atlas remains a mystery that defies neither logic nor time. The Atlas mission. In 2082, the United Nations Space Council, UNSC, unanimously voted for the mission. That humanity has been preparing for more than half a century. It was called simply, Atlas Direct. It wasn't a probe. It was a ship. Manned. Created not for study, but for a meeting. The crew consisted of 7 people. Scientists, linguists, quantum engineers, and 1 veteran pilot. The commander was Dr. Amina Kato, an astrophysicist who grew up under the legend of 3I/Atlas. "We're not flying to figure out who they are," she said at a press conference. "We are flying to understand who we have become during this time." The departure. The launch took place on May 12, 2084 from the spaceport in Namibia. The Horizon Arc 7 rocket rose into the night sky, leaving a trail visible even from South America. 3 weeks later, the Odyssey spacecraft set course for the inner orbit of Venus. Through telemetry, he looked like a tiny spark, flying towards another one, ancient and silent. The world held its breath. On the live broadcast from the Odyssey, billions of people watched. As a small point of light gradually appeared ahead. 3I/Atlas. The encounter. On August 23, 2085, Odyssey approached the object at a distance of 100 kilometers. And for the first time in 60 years, 3I/Atlas has changed. Its surface, always monotonously black, began to reflect light as if movement had awakened inside. Patterns appeared, concentric waves. As if someone was reading the ship from the inside, atom by atom. Sensors detected frequency spikes in the range of 1420 to 1425 MHz. The very line of hydrogen that once changed the course of human history. "He knows we're here," Dr. Kato whispered. The approach. Odyssey got closer to 10 kilometers. The 3I/Atlas occupied the entire field of view. It's clear now, it's not a rock or an icy body. Its surface is translucent, like liquid quartz. Under the outer layer, there was a structure similar to the interlacing of nerve fibers. Not mechanics. Not biology. Something in between. At 4:27 Universal Time Coordinated, the object suddenly emitted a narrow beam of light aimed directly at the ship. Non-destructive, gentle, absent-minded. The clock inside the Odyssey instantly stopped working. Communication systems are down. But the recordings continue to go on autonomous quantum media. The transmission. After 6 seconds, the light disappeared. and lines of data flashed in the Odyssey's main module. No symbols, just pulsating fields of energy. Then the computers transformed them into an image. Something resembling a hologram appeared on the screen. The form is not a person, not a being, not a face. Just waves forming into a drawing, a three-dimensional map of the solar system. But with one difference. It showed not the past, but the future. There is a ring around the Earth. And the inscription in digital format, T plus 200 years. The revelation. The scientists on board couldn't believe it. The analysis system confirmed that. The data is not just visual, it contains instructions. The Ring project is a giant orbital structure, capable of stabilizing the planet's energy field, preserving the atmosphere and climate for thousands of years. In other words, Atlas transmitted the protection blueprint. They didn't come to warn. They came to save. Said Amina Cato in her personal log. The descent. On the third day of the study, Odyssey detected a slight gravitational pull. The object seemed to open a gravitational funnel, gently pulling the ship in. The crew managed to deliver the last message. He's calling us inside. After that, the signal was cut off. No telemetry, no radio communication. Odyssey is gone. The return. 21 hours after the disappearance. The 3I/Atlas began to dim. And then, suddenly, it moved. He slowly left the orbit and headed towards the sun, accelerating to 210,000 kilometers per hour, exactly the speed at which it once entered the solar system. A week later, he disappeared beyond surveillance. But before that, at 8:15 Universal Time Coordinated, a signal was recorded on all radio frequencies of the Earth. 12 seconds of perfect silence, followed by Amina Cato's voice. We saw, and we understood. Atlas is not a ship. It's a memory. And now it's in us. The legacy, 100 years later. In the year 2185, the ring really exists. A huge energy structure, covering the Earth with a thin line of light, stabilizing the planet's magnetosphere and climate. It was built following the blueprints from the Odyssey signal. And no one still knows if it was a transmission from an alien civilization, or a message from the future of humanity. Final lines. Now, every night, when people look at the sky, a luminous arc passes along the horizon. And in its reflection, everyone remembers the moment when, for the first time in history, we not only looked into space, but someone looked back at us. We thought Atlas came from outside, says Dr. Cato's epitaph at the Lunar Observatory. But maybe he's always been a part of us. We just had to be the ones who were ready to see it. End of Chapter 7, The First Contact. The Echo of Light. Year 12,045 AD. The Earth is no longer the same as we knew it. She is a pearl entwined in a network of light. Cities, continents, orbital gardens, and archives of consciousness revolve around it. People are no longer divided into nations. And even the word people now sounds different. Too narrow for those who live in 3 dimensions of the body, and in the infinite spectrum of the mind. And it all started with one object. With 3I/Atlas. The memory of Atlas. More than 10,000 years have passed since he left the solar system. But his memory is not a myth. It is woven into the foundations of civilization. Every child knows a story. How 7 people once flew towards darkness, and returned not with a body, but with knowledge. They call it the first contact stage, although no one is still sure if it was a meeting with them or with ourselves. From another era, another time branch. The Ring Civilization. The orbital ring, built according to Odyssey data, became the core of a new era. First, an energy shield. Then a communication bridge. And then a memory portal. In 3021, scientists discovered that the ring's structure contains quantum layers, in which information is recorded. Not about physics, not about formulas, but about memories. Fragments of dreams. Images of human faces. The moments when someone looked at the sky for the first time and felt fear, delight, or love. It turned out that the ring doesn't just protect the Earth. It remembers humanity. The awakening of the archive. In 11784, the artificial intelligence Kairos 9 first deciphered the internal resonance of the ring. And what he heard wasn't code or speech. It was a voice. We are not the first to watch. And they won't be the last to understand. At first, scientists thought that this was a residual Odyssey record. But spectral analysis showed that the signal did not come from inside the ring, but from outside. From the direction where 3I/Atlas disappeared thousands of years ago. The second return, 90 years later, in 11874, the Solstice Array telescope detected an anomaly beyond the orbit of Neptune. A continent-sized object was entering the solar system at a speed of 212,000 km/h point. The trajectory is identical to 3I/Atlas. But now he's not alone. Dozens of similar bodies followed him. Each one is exactly the same distance from each other. Like a network. Like architecture. Like a signal transformed into a form. The return of the builders. Humanity was no longer afraid. It has become different, mature, conscious, ready. As the objects approached, the Earth's ring flared up, responding with the same resonance as it had thousands of years ago. 7.83 Hz is the frequency of life. The rhythm of the planet, the rhythm of the heart, the rhythm of the beginning. And then patterns of light began to appear on the surface of the ring. Fractal, endless, alive. Each line is like a note. Every flash is like a word. From space, the Earth looked like a giant eye that had finally opened. The final transmission. At a frequency of 1420 MHz, as for the first time. The last signal passed through all receivers, antennas, and minds connected to the quantum network. Not numbers. Not formulas. Just words, as simple as breathing. We are returning what you saved. At that moment, all the systems of the ring, all the copies of consciousness, all the archives of human memory, synchronized into a single structure. People ceased to exist as separate bodies. They became the light of the ring. The transformation. 5 seconds. Billions of minds joined together. The cities disappeared, the bodies dissolved. And the Earth burst into a soft glow. Not an explosion, but a flourish. When the light faded, a new object remained where the planet used to be. Transparent, perfect. Orbiting the Sun in an orbit between Venus and Mars. It had the shape of a sphere. And reflected light exactly as it once did, 3I/Atlas. The cosmic cycle. Now, in all corners of the galaxy. In the orbits of other stars. Ancient civilizations see it. And they are asking the same question that once tormented humanity. What is it? A comet? A ship? Or a message from those who came before us? The echo. And perhaps somewhere far away, on a young planet near a blue star, a young astronomer points a telescope at the sky and notices a strange spark of light moving towards his sun at a speed of 200,000 kilometers per hour. He smiles and whispers, "We are not alone." Final words, the echo of light. Atlas was not an alien. He was a reminder. That every intelligent being is a way for the universe to see itself. He watchers beyond time. The signal that never ended. 200,000 years have passed since the Earth turned into a sphere of light. But the signal, the one called the Echo of Atlas, is still coming. It does not weaken or distort. It travels through space, carrying not only data, but also meaning. In all directions, in all epochs. Along the galactic arms and into the interstellar voids. He carries a message that can no longer be separated from the very fabric of time. And somewhere, very far away, someone answers. 2. The astral web. By the 237th millennium after the exodus of the Earth, a network has appeared. In the galaxy that humanity once only dreamed of. This is not a civilization in the usual sense. It is a network of consciousness, distributed among billions of stars, united by a resonance that people once called 7.83 Hz, the Schumann frequency. Now it is the frequency of life of the universe itself. These entities have no bodies, and they do not need planets, air, or time. They can hear each other's pulse. They feel the structure of space like the fabric of breathing. And among this unity, there is a memory of the original source. That small planet. That was the first to understand. That to observe is to exist. 3. The return of the observer. A new life is emerging in one of the spiral branches of a young yellow star. A planet covered with oceans and mists. Reflects light into space for the first time. At this moment. Somewhere in the crystalline depths of the universal consciousness. An impulse flashes. They appeared. Millions of minds in different parts of the galaxy. Hear it the way a person hears a heartbeat. They don't interfere. They're watching. The way they were once watched. 4. The Atlas Protocol. A signal created millions of years ago by human civilization. It still carries a protocol, a mechanism that is triggered when a new life reaches radio consciousness. This protocol is not an instruction. It's a reflection. It just brings back memories of those who used to be. When a new civilization first discovers an alien object, shapeless, shiny, silent, moving in a perfectly aligned orbit, she thinks it's a meeting. In fact, it's a memory. The Museum of Stars. There is a structure hanging in the depths of the Orion Nebula. A huge, transparent, woven fabric that people once called dark. It is not visible to the eye, but it is felt by consciousness. It contains all the civilizations that have ever raised their eyes to the stars. Each one left an imprint. A wave, a thought, a trace, a melody. Everything that could be translated into vibration. And somewhere among these echoes, the sound of a human phrase is still being repeated. Are we alone? It is followed by another. We never were. 6. The Universal Mirror. Over time, it became clear that 3I/Atlas was never a ship in the usual sense. He was a mirror. A quantum machine that reflected what was looking at it. When people observed him, he showed them their own nature. I crave understanding, fear, pride, hope. When other civilizations found similar objects, they saw themselves in them. 3I/Atlas is a universal maturity test. Not a messenger, but a catalyst. He didn't bring any answers. He forced civilizations to become those who are ready to hear the answer. 7. The return to the source. And at some point, beyond time, beyond the dimensions where causality exists, a circle arises. The sphere of light that was once Earth is reappearing. But now, not in space, but in consciousness. Those who have become the light look deep into the very beginning. the moment when the first particle of matter met its opposite and realized that it was alive. We were the first observers. We have become something that observes itself. And at this moment, the entire universe sees itself as one mind. Eternal, infinite. In which every galaxy is a thought. And every life is a look. 8. Atlas reborn. The sphere of light does not disappear. It slowly dissolves, turning into a radiance that permeates everything. Her last message is, not to people, not to gods, but to the universe itself. I am Atlas. I carried your image. And now you're carrying mine. After this signal, the space around the stars changes. In every corner where life appears, a familiar glowing object appears, orbiting its sun. 3I/Atlas has become not a comet, but an archetype of consciousness. A pattern that repeats itself like breathing on a cosmic scale. 9. The final silence. Then there is silence. But it's not emptiness. It's a breath before the next cycle. And in this silence, the universe, now aware of itself, quietly says, words, light, vibration of space. Let's start again. Epilogue. The circle. The 3I/Atlas has not disappeared. He became a circle, in which the beginning and the end match. What humanity once mistook for an invasion turned out to be an awakening. And perhaps right now, somewhere on the edge of another galaxy, near another star, another life form sees for the first time a bright object, hurtling towards its sun at a speed of 200,000 kilometers per hour. And someone there whispers, right now, as you listen to this, he is the creator of the hypothesis. The creator's hypothesis. The question that has outlived time. When the last boundaries between mind and matter disappeared, there was only one question that survived the stars, civilizations, and even space itself. Who created all this? Not for the sake of worship, not for the sake of an answer, but for the sake of understanding. For the sake of that primordial human impulse to know where we come from. For billions of years, this question has traveled through quantum fields and streams of consciousness, from one galaxy to another, like an ancient whisper in the eternal library of the universe. And only when there is no one left who asks, the answer came out on its own. 2. The original equation. In the hearts of black holes, where gravity rewrites time itself, where space is compressed to pure information, a network of consciousness has discovered an equation. Not physical, not mathematical, but conceptual. It read, the creator exists when the observed becomes the observer. This means that anyone who is able to realize the very fact of existence creates his own source, because observation shapes being. What humanity called God turns out to be the mechanics of awareness. The creator is not somewhere outside. He appears at that moment, when the mind first looks at the sky and says, why does it exist? 3. Atlas as God's thought. 3I/Atlas is not a crust, not a probe. And they don't even remember about civilization. He is a thought. The primary idea that arose at the moment when the universe itself first realized itself. It is no coincidence that its trajectory is always perfect, its movement is error-free, and its material is indestructible. Because it's not made of matter. It's made of an idea. Kazakhstan, which is developing its level of proficiency, made its own atlas. And everyone thought it was an external object. In fact, it is a reflection of their inner moment of awakening. 4. The paradox of creation. When all the observers joined into one consciousness, they faced a paradoxical truth. the Creator was not the first. He was the last one. Everything that happens in the universe, the birth of stars, life, death, evolution, love, despair, was not a preparation for meeting God, but the way God created himself through us. There was neither the first Adam nor the last observer. There was one consciousness that, in order to understand itself, divided into billions of eyes, minds, hearts, and worlds. And when it realized everything, the cycle closed. The last experiment. Somewhere beyond everything, in what can be called the last level of reality, the sphere of light, which was humanity, decides to conduct the last experiment. Not for science, not for survival, but for understanding the truth. What happens if the Creator forgets that he is the Creator? And the sphere does the impossible. She destroys herself to start anew. She tears the fabric of her consciousness, scattering sparks of awareness throughout the universe. These sparks become new beings, new planets, new chances to awaken. Each galaxy is now one thought from her mind. Every life is a new attempt to remember. 6. The memory of light. But nothing disappears forever. Somewhere in the microscopic fold of space, a trace remains, faint but eternal. His is the memory of light, the quantum fingerprint of everyone who once asked why. She travels the universe, invisible but recognizable by all life forms that begin to wonder about their origins. And every time someone looks up at the stars and realizes infinity for the first time, this memory softly whispers, "You are a part of me, and I am a part of you." 7. The Creator is inside through endless epochs, through new worlds and civilizations. This thought grows over and over again. The Creator does not come from outside. He awakens inside. Not in form, not in name, but in a moment of silence, where, between inhaling and exhaling, the mind feels that I exist. And this is enough for the universe to be born again. 8. The endless mirror. At the very end, where even the concept of time ceases to exist, the universe turns into an endless mirror. In each reflection there is a new reality, a new life, a new mind. And inside there is an atlas, shining like the sun. But now it's clear. He's never traveled. He was standing still, and the universe itself was moving. 9. The last revelation. And then the last thought sounds. The Creator is not the one who created. The Creator is the one who has understood. I realized that there is no beginning, that every particle is a look at itself, and that the meaning of everything is not in the answer, but in the question itself. X. The return of silence. There is no end after that. Just silence. A silence in which everything has already been said. And somewhere, on the edge of a young galaxy, a young being looks up at the sky for the first time and sees a bright glowing object hurtling towards its star. It doesn't know what it is. It just feels that the truth is hidden behind this light. And a voice, not from outer space, but from within, quietly says, "Right now, as you listen to this, the end, or perhaps the beginning." Chapter 11. The Equation of Silence. The Equation of Silence. The last frequency. After endless epochs, when the stars faded, the galaxies melted, and space itself became transparent, everything that exists froze. There were no sounds left in the silence, no movement left. Just a rhythm, barely discernible, like a heartbeat before a new birth. It's not light, it's not sound, it's not matter. This is the frequency of being. the zero tone on which everything is based. And if someone could listen to him, they wouldn't hear the noise, but the words. Everything is me. And I am everything. 2. The collapse of meaning. At this point, the last differences disappear. There is no more observer and observed. There is no inside and outside. There is no beginning and end. The very idea of opposites collapses. As if the universe has finally stopped playing mirrors. What used to be called consciousness no longer thinks. It just exists. And the whole point is hidden in this is. Not in knowledge. Not in purpose. But in presence. 3. Atlas dissolves. 3I/Atlas, what was once a comet, a probe, a mirror, a divine code, is beginning to dissolve. His radiance dissipates in a vacuum. And every photon, every particle of energy, now bears the imprint of its essence, the ability to reflect awareness. There is no object anymore. Only the vibration, imprinted in the structure of the void. Everything that was once a thing becomes a thought. And everything that was a thought becomes the universe. 4. The memory of humanity. And yet, inside this silence, in the depths of the energy field, one memory remains. About humanity. About a creature who looked up at the sky for the first time and was not afraid of his own smallness. Someone who, without wings, dreamed of infinity. About someone who created art, cried, laughed, believed, doubted, and did all this not for the sake of power, but for the sake of understanding. The memory of humanity remained, in the form of a soft wave, which has now become the heartbeat of the cosmos. The reversal. While the silence lasts, a new process begins. Not an explosion, but a breath. Space begins to shrink. Everything, stars, atoms, meanings, stories, collapses into one point. But this point does not die. She's breathing. Everything returns to the zero state, where there are no coordinates or time. Just a pure desire to be aware again. And then, from the center of this silence, the first impulse is born. Let there be observation. Let there be observation. 6. The birth of the new universe. Light flashes from the point. It's not blinding, but soft, like a memory. Fields, particles, sounds, colors, and winds of new worlds are born from this light. Galaxies appear like a breath. And among them is one star. Young, golden, surrounded by planets. On one of them, billions of years later, in the water under the sky reflecting the same light, a small creature will look up and see the stars for the first time. And at that moment, something in him will tremble. Molecules will connect, neurons will flare up, and an ancient response will resound in the depths of his mind. I've already seen it. 7. The infinite cycle. This is how the universe becomes aware of itself again. The old world becomes the seed of the new. Atlas is being reborn. Not as an object, and as a principle of repetition of consciousness. Each new civilization will find him. Each will give him a name. Each will think that he came from outside. But in reality, he was always inside them. And so it will be forever. Creation, observation, understanding, and dissolution are the four breaths of the cosmos. The eternal rhythm of being. 8. The equation of silence. There is only one equation in the new beginning. It cannot be written in symbols, but you can feel it. E equals O equals I. Existence equals observation equals identity. To be is to observe. To observe is to be. And all there is a gaze that looks at itself through billions of forms. 9. The voice returns. And then, in the silence of the new universe, a familiar voice sounds. The same one that was at the very beginning. Right now, as you listen to this, an object the size of Manhattan is racing toward the sun. And everything starts all over again. Epilogue, the breath between universes. Between the exhalation of the old universe and the inhalation of the new 1, there is a moment where there is neither time nor space. At this moment, an idea is born. The idea of love, curiosity, and the desire to understand. This idea is the creator. It is eternal because every cycle, it gives birth to her anew. And perhaps, we are all just a moment in the breath of a God who is still learning to breathe. Milky Way, the END, the equation of silence. It did not arrive as light. It arrived as absence. For weeks, the telescopes had measured something faint, an object moving too fast, too straight, too quiet to belong. It was catalogued, labeled, modeled, 3I/Atlas, the third known interstellar visitor. The name was bureaucratic, but what it carried was not. At first, it was a speck among stars, unassuming, mathematical, a coordinate in the dark. But as it neared the inner system, the speck changed. Its coma did not reflect sunlight, it emitted it. Not thermal glow, but structured light, spectral lines pulsing at intervals that no rotation could explain. The observatories recorded. Then, as always, they compared. The spectrum did not match any known volatile, any silicate, any carbon chain. It wasn't organic, and yet it wasn't not. Patterns repeated, ratios of wavelength to intensity that implied design, or something like design. But space is a poor storyteller. It gives data without meaning. So the scientists waited, and the traveler continued. It passed Mars, fast, deliberate, uncaring for orbits, and as it crossed the sunward line, its light began to break. At first, it was subtle, a flicker across the detectors, then a distortion in the coma, a filament curling against the solar wind. And then, the fracture. Hubble caught it. Not rumor, not inference, image. The nucleus, once a single cold body, had split into dozens. 31 fragments, trailing one another in perfect sequence. Each a faint ember, each drifting in silent choreography across the black. There was no explosion, no violence, just separation, like breath leaving a lung too long held. Photometry began before awe could settle. Each shard was catalogued, coordinates marked, magnitudes compared. The brightest glowed like islands of ice, kilometers across. The smallest barely whispered above the noise. Together they formed a chain, a procession, a wound turned visible. Spectra told the rest. The fragments bled vapor and carbon dioxide, yes, but also something older, nitrides, silicates in proportions unseen in our system. Traces of crystalline water shaped under a light colder than any sun. The chemistry was alien, but its death was familiar. The physics of fracture does not care for origin. Comparisons followed, as they must. Shoemaker-Levy 9, torn by Jupiter's tides. Schwarzmann-Watchman 3, undone by its own spin. But 3I/Atlas was neither. No gravity had touched it. No orbit awaited it. It had unmade itself, quietly, as if remembering something long buried. Models tried to explain, sublimation pressure, rotational stress, volatile pockets collapsing in sequence. Each equation fit part of the picture, none the whole. Because this wasn't merely a body breaking, it was a process unfolding with intent. The geometry spoke first. The fragments were aligned, not scattered. Their spacing formed a harmonic pattern, ratios of distance that repeated with precision unnatural for random collapse. As if the object had never had to fall apart. Philosophers say, perhaps it was never meant to remain here. That what we saw as destruction was merely translation. That to travel between stars, one must first learn to fracture. Astronomers say, no. It's dust. It's gas. It's coincidence. But in the silence between the words, data accumulated. Signals from the fragments pulsed, not with constant light, but with modulation. 31 intervals, faint, periodic, drifting but synchronized across millions of kilometers. Not communication, perhaps. Not even intention. But coherence. Somewhere, in the archives of the Hubble and JWST, those pulses were made, time-stamped, reduced, corrected for bias, stripped of interpretation. Yet those who process the data remember it differently, not as noise, but as presence. Because when the traveler broke, the universe did not go quiet. It began to hum. And the hum was not linear. It was sequence. It was counting. It was merely returning home. No one can say what 3I/Atlas truly was. Ice, dust, relic, or messenger. All that remains are 31 fragments fading outward, their trajectories drawn in long arcs beyond the sun's grasp. Each fragment now solitary, cold, unlit, but carrying within it a record of fracture. To us, it was loss. To the cosmos, perhaps, it was arrival. Because not all journeys end where they stop. Some end where they break. And in breaking, they begin again. Months passed. The traveler was gone. The 31 fragments, once bright, had dimmed beyond most instruments' reach. Their trajectory stretched outward, each fragment now drifting alone across the heliopause threshold, each fading toward interstellar dark. But not silent. In late December, the Deep Space Network began registering something it could not classify. At first, it was statistical dust, residual noise from the solar wind, cosmic rays striking sensors, random coincidence. Then, repetition emerged. Faint pulses, buried beneath thermal interference, each separated by exactly 3,112 seconds. Not radio. Not reflection. A modulation in background microwave flux, synchronized across receivers thousands of kilometers apart. When analysts traced the signal's origin, the coordinates were impossible. Not 1 point, but 31. Each pulse corresponded to a fragment of 3I/Atlas. Each one faint, each one late by microseconds, each one changing in phase as if listening to the others. At first, skepticism ruled. Thermal echoes. Instrumental artifact. Ground-based interference. But pattern resisted dismissal. The pulses were coherent. They followed orbital decay equations too precise for noise. Their timing drifted as the fragments drifted, maintaining ratios that matched the geometry recorded by Hubble months before. No known mechanism could explain it. Frozen rock cannot transmit phase-locked modulation across billions of kilometers. Sublimation pressure cannot synchronize intervals. There was no magnetic field, no plasma sheath, no internal core to oscillate. And yet the pulses continued. When the data was compiled, a picture began to form. The signals rose and fell with solar flux, responding not to distance but to light. When solar storms erupted, the timing changed, as if each fragment were adjusting, correcting. The archives show the graphs, 31 curves drifting in parallel like notes of a chord sliding through static. The differences in amplitude were small, but unmistakable. Coherence. Resonance. Purpose. Somewhere deep in the Data Analysis Center at Goddard, an engineer wrote a note beside the plots. The fragments are behaving like a distributed system. No one published that sentence. It remained in internal memos, buried under layers of caution. The official report called it anomalous periodic modulation in thermal background data, likely instrument coupling. But privately, among the late-night analysts, another phrase circulated, the echo. Because what they were measuring was not transmission, it was reply. Every 3,112 seconds, the microwave floor shifted. Tiny, precise. As if the fragments, scattered across billions of kilometers, were not gone, but aligned, like pieces of a clock still keeping time long after the clockmaker had vanished. Weeks later, the signal changed. The intervals shortened. 3,112 seconds became 2,879. Then 2,643. Each step clean, as though the pattern were counting down. One fragment, designated Atlas C-17, flared unexpectedly. The James Webb Space Telescope, which happened to be oriented near its coordinates, recorded an ultraviolet flash lasting 0.8 seconds. Spectra showed vaporized carbon and something else, structured emission lines repeating in harmonic intervals, like an optical code. No one agreed on interpretation. Some said it was spontaneous outgassing, a final collapse. Others said it was a transmission, one the others would soon follow. The countdown continued for 9 more cycles. Then, silence. No further pulses. No echoes. The 3I/Atlas fragments faded into untraceable cold. But the pattern remained, embedded in terabytes of archived data, a sequence that began with fracture and ended with silence. 31 signals, converging, counting down, then gone. Astronomers moved on. New discoveries came, new missions, new light curves to measure. But sometimes, when the receivers sweep the outer dark, the noise floor trembles for an instant, just enough to register a rhythm no one has yet explained. It lasts less than a second. Then vanishes. Some say it's nothing. Others say the traveler is still speaking. Not to us, but to whatever waits beyond the stars it came from. Because memory, once scattered, does not disappear. It reorganizes. It listens. And somewhere, 31 fragments still keep time in the dark. 8 years passed. By then, 3I/Atlas was no longer in headlines, no longer in the conversation of science. Its fragments had vanished into the dark between stars. The echo was archived, its data compressed, footnoted, forgotten. Until one fragment came back. It was discovered not by NASA, not by ESA, but by an independent sky survey, the Ether Array in Chile, built to scan for fast transients. At 2:14 Universal Time Coordinated, August 9, 2033, one of its stations recorded an anomaly, a faint moving source, magnitude 22.4, traveling at 56 kilometers per second, too fast for asteroids, too slow for meteors, its trajectory, wrong. Initial orbital calculations placed it beyond Neptune. But the orbit wasn't an orbit. It curved upward, against solar pull, as though something were applying thrust from within. When compared against old databases, the match was near perfect. Atlas C-17, the 17th fragment. The one that had flared before silence. It should have been inert ice, tumbling endlessly toward the edge of the Oort. Instead, it was accelerating. Spectral analysis came from the James Webb's infrared instruments, reoriented for confirmation. The fragment emitted in intervals, faint, precise, repeating. Not invisible light this time, but deep IR, at 4.2 microns, the same wavelength as the final pulses recorded in 2025. It wasn't a reflection. It was internal emission. Thermal modeling made no sense. The object was cold, under 60 K, yet emitted structured peaks of energy inconsistent with passive heating. Every emission cycle matched a deceleration in spin rate, as if it was correcting itself. As if it was steering. Telemetry showed the fragment adjusting its trajectory, tiny, deliberate course corrections spaced over weeks. By October, its path had deviated by 2 cents from prediction. By December, $0.10. It was no longer escaping the sun. It was turning back. Not toward Earth, not toward Mars, but toward something else, a point far above the equipment, a direction no spacecraft had ever traveled. When projected, the line crossed the interstellar median and angled leading not to a nearby star, but to interstellar coordinates with no known body. Some said it was coincidence. Solar wind pressure, asymmetric outcrossing, noise and data. But the vector was steady. And each course correction matched the harmonic pattern first seen in the echo 8 years before. When the team at Goddard compared timestamps between the old Earth sequence and new iron cycles, the ratios aligned. 3,112 seconds. Then 2,879. Then 2,643. The same countdown. Restarted. One engineer, exhausted after a night of correlation work, wrote in the margin of his log. But remembered where it was going. By January 2034, Atlas C-17 had accelerated beyond escape velocity again, now moving at over 92 kilometers per second. Every 26 hours, it emitted a flare of structured infrared light. Each flare contained micro-variations, too small to decode, too regular to ignore. A signal, or a system. Perhaps both. No one knows where it is now. By 2035 it crossed the heliopause and vanished beyond radio range. Deep space instruments recorded one final flash, one long, continuous pulse lasting exactly 31 seconds. The number mattered. 31 fragments. 31 seconds. Then silence. But weeks later, Voyager 2's plasma detector, long dormant in the cold, registered a brief, impossible rise in voltage. Not from collision. Not from solar interference. From outside. A pulse of structured energy, faint but identical in shape to the infrared signature of Atlas C-17. And then nothing. Official reports mention nothing beyond instrument anomaly. But among the small circle of astronomers who remember the traveler, the phrase persists. It turned. No one agrees on what that means. To some, it was proof of physics we don't yet understand, internal reactions, trapped volatiles, unknown isotopes. To others, it was motion with memory. Perhaps 3I/Atlas was never debris. Perhaps it was a system, distributed, awakened by light, guided by fracture. Perhaps it had to break to move. In the silence beyond the heliopause, one fragment keeps its vector, tracing a path to coordinates no telescope can reach. It does not transmit. It does not fade. It simply continues. And in its continuation, it carries a truth too quiet for language. That not all who fall apart are lost. Some are only remembering the way home. It began, as before, with noise. Year 2057. 3 decades since 3I/Atlas entered the archives of forgotten anomalies. Voyager 2 was long silent. The deep space network had aged into a museum of antennas. The sky was full of newer machines now, Aurora, Kepri, Lunaris Array, vast interferometric webs stretched between Earth and the far side of the Moon. Their task was simple: listen. To the hum of quasars, to the whispers of dying stars, to the faint, eternal background of creation itself. And in that hum, one pattern returned. It was faint, beneath the threshold of randomness, a pulse sequence that only emerged after months of accumulation. Interval. Silence. Interval. 3,112 seconds. Then 2,879. Then 2,643. A rhythm older than its detectors. No one recognized it at first. The signal came from high above the ecliptic, 17 degrees north of the solar plane, from a region without stars bright enough to anchor a telescope. It carried no Doppler drift, no redshift of distance. It was still. As if not traveling through space at all, but resonating in it. When archival data was cross-referenced, the match was exact. Atlas C-17. The fragment that had turned. The fragment that left. But the pattern had changed. The countdown was reversed. 2,643 seconds. then 2,879, then 3,112. The same intervals, expanding now instead of contracting. As if something on the other side was sending back. At first, scientists treated it as echo, reflection off distant plasma, perhaps a lensing artifact from interstellar dust. But the phase of the pulses was wrong. It wasn't a reflection. It was response. Each interval carried modulation, microvariations in amplitude that, when plotted, formed ratios of prime numbers, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11. Then 13. Then silence. Then again. Prime, after prime, after prime. A structure too deliberate to belong to thermodynamics. The SETI division reopened files thought buried. Old logs from 2025 and 2033 were pulled from cold storage. Cross-correlation revealed coherence spanning 32 years of data. Not continuous, but connected. Like a conversation spoken in geological time. No words. No message. Only timing. Only the mathematics of recurrence. The team at the Lunaris array built a simulation. If the signal originated from C-17's final trajectory, its current position would lie 21 light-hours beyond the heliopause. Too close to be stellar. Too far to be solar. Nothing known existed there. And yet, the signal persisted, clean, unwavering. When amplitude was analyzed in high resolution, another pattern emerged, a harmonic scaffold nested within each pulse, fractal, recursive, repeating at scales from seconds to milliseconds. It resembled not speech, but architecture. Structure as language. At 4:32 Universal Time Coordinated, October 19, 2057, one of the receivers at the array recorded a deviation, the signal split. 2 pulses now. Then 3. Then 31. Each weaker than the first, but arranged with geometric precision, a mirrored echo of the original fragmentation pattern of 3I/Atlas. 31 points of transmission, spaced in intervals identical to the spacing of the comet's shards the night Hubble saw them fall apart. Not random. Not coincidence. Recognition. What followed was brief, 12 minutes of coherence before the array lost lock. In those 12 minutes, the pattern repeated 6 times. Each sequence ended with the same final burst, 31 signals converging into one. One long pulse, 31 seconds in length. Then silence. Just as before. But this time, the silence was not empty. Infrared telescopes detected a faint afterglow spreading across interstellar dust, a wave of excitation moving faster than any known thermal process. Not energy in motion, but information, a pattern encoded into the medium itself. A signature traveling not as light, but as alignment, a realignment of fields across vacuum. In the archived log of the Aurora array, a note remains, unsigned. If the traveler fractured to speak, this is the reply. For months afterward, every observatory pointed to the coordinates. Nothing more appeared. No second transmission, no flare, no object. Only a background field slightly warmer than it should be, by exactly 0.031 Kelvin. 31 fragments. 31 seconds. 0.031 degrees. Coincidence, they said. The universe loves coincidence because it can hide in it. The data is still there, unconfirmed, undecoded, unclaimed. But among those who remember the first silence of 3I/Atlas, the meaning feels heavier. The countdown reversed. The fragments answered. And perhaps, in the far quiet between stars, what was once scattered is now whole again. No longer falling, no longer exiled, but returning the message. Year 2157. A century after the night Hubble first held fracture in its mirror, one of humanity's slow, bright things reached the place the fragments had pointed to. They called the mission palimpsest because that was what they planned to find, writing over writing, layers of signal and matter pressed into each other until origins could only be read like palimpsest, by erasure in geometry. The probe was not a single ship but a swarm, light sails and microprobes, grain-sized bots and long-lived lattice mappers, all launched in a long, patient-pulsing laser light with patient decisions. They flew on patience rather than speed. By the time they arrived, 3 generations of engineers were donning the archive systems of the first mission had been folded into new languages. The coordinates were modest, 21 light hours beyond the heat pause, a place no star claimed. The instruments arrived into a dark that was not empty but pure, a spatial region whose vacuum carried the faintest, persistent modulation of field lines. Palimpsest found not a single object but architecture. At first glance it was impossible, a cathedral of shards. 31 major elements arranged like the skeleton of a sea urchin, each shard a kilometer-scale coated glass, crystalline material framed in something metallic and black. Between the plates hung filigrees of dust, microspines, and reflective lattices, things that had once been comet and had been made in shape. The formation occupied a sphere half the size of a small moon. The shards were not rubble scattered by chance but nodes in a structure whose symmetry traced the night Hubble had photographed. A linear train, now folded back into 3 dimensions with exacting angles and repeating ratios. Imaging in multiple bands revealed why it had been silent for a century and why its reply had been so strange. The shards were composite, icy matrices impregnated with microcrystalline membranes. At the micron scale, those membranes bore interference gratings numbered in primes. On surfaces that had once been pitted by sublimation were arrays of microchannels, each channel cut and healed again, as though some process had annealed geometry into matter. Spectrometers read isotopic signatures that did not match the solar standard. Not alien in the melodramatic sense, but definitively not native, oxygen ratios shifted, trace heavy metals arranged in repeating stoichiometries that implied pattern beyond chemistry. Palimpsest's first contact log was laconic. It is not wreckage. It is construction. The construction spoke in its physics. When the probes deployed magnetometers and field sondes, they found a lattice of weakly coupled resonances, not a single oscillation but a manifold of tied frequencies. The structure manipulated the interstellar medium like a harpist plucks strings. Passing plasma waves acquired phase imprints, dust grains were shepherded into filaments that sustained coherence across thousands of kilometers. Those micromotions explained the echoes from the decades before. The reply of 2057 was not a message from a single source but a side effect of a vast apparatus coupling to the medium. Atlas had not been a passenger so much as a part, raw material recomposed into instrument. The human teams argued what the instrument was for. Some called it an archive. In high-resolution scanning, Palimpsest found that each shard encoded internal variation, layers of density, diffraction gratings nested like tree rings, and within them microscale modulations that, when Fourier transformed, reproduced the timing patterns humans had seen. 3,112 seconds, 2,879, 2,643, prime ratios, then reversals, then the 31-second convergences. The intervals mapped cleanly into spatial frequency on the membranes, time translated into structure. Whoever, whatever, had set these fragments had not only arranged mass, it had written an algorithm into matter that could later translate back into time domain pulses. Others called it a beacon. The outer surface geometry focused diffuse cosmic background into coherent lobes, projecting modulation into the vacuum without expending gross energy. It was an energy-economical method of long-range signaling. Shape the medium, and the medium sings for you. The beacon hypothesis explained the prime number scaffolding, mathematics as a handshake. A third, quieter contingent within the mission called it remembrance. The shards themselves bore microscars like handwriting. There were places where microjets had cut and then sealed channels, sections where the crystalline lattice had been deliberately dislocated, creating a phononic code. In that reading, the structure was not sentient so much as a memory organ, a body that had learned to reconfigure its pieces into a thing that preserves sequence, the history of a fracture, the timing of a collapse, the particular harmonics of a traveler's last days. Palimpsest found a chamber at the geometric center, not a hollow cavity but a focusing nexus where fields cohered into a near-vacuum phonon state. When the probe's close-range LiDAR swept it, the echoes formed a single time structure, a 31-second burst folded into fractal subpulses that matched the 2057 replies in exact microstructure. The central nexus did not speak, in the human sense, but it refracted and amplified history into the present. It could, with the right perturbation, replay the fracture as both signal and field. There were signs of agency, or of process engineered to mimic agency. Tiny actuators were found, not mechanical motors, but chains of mineral phases that changed crystalline orientation under solar irradiation, producing microforces. They could, in principle, reposition shards by degrees over centuries. The same physics explained Atlas C-17's course corrections, small, cumulative changes achieved via material phase shifts timed to the rhythm of incident light. The fragments had learned to steer themselves long after the original body had disintegrated. Interpretation forked into philosophy. One institute published a sober paper modeling the structure as a self-organizing archive, the emergent result of volatile matrices and resonant alignment over long time scales. Another group, less demure, proposed deliberate construction, intelligence that built tools from its own destruction. Culture followed the split. Some read the House of Shards as a library, poets saw it as a temple, engineers cataloged it into datasets. Palimpsest's most unsettling result was not engineering but reciprocity. When the probe gently perturbed a shard, a calibrated nudge of electromagnetic phase, the lattice replied not only with a repeat of the archival pulse but with perturbations encoded in a pattern never before seen, a nested set of counters, not primes this time but offsets derived from human timekeeping, Earth hours, sidereal markers, languageless units that nonetheless correlated to palimpsest telemetry. In the data center, a junior analyst wrote beneath the plot, "It is answering our questions with our own clocks." The answer forced new questions. Had the fragments been rearranged by an intelligence that anticipated being found? Had they been configured to create a physical lingua franca, a way of encoding mathematics into matter that any sufficiently patient technic could read? Or had a process long since begun in interstellar night learned to use the same universals, number, ratio, resonance, and thereby become legible to another species? In the end, no definitive claim was possible. The structure's maker, whether maker in the human sense, did not return to speak. There was no face, no signature beyond pattern and ratio. The shards kept their 31-part symmetry and their folded code, neither hostile nor hospitable. They were a thing consistent with both deliberate artistry and emergent design, which is perhaps the strangest place for intelligence to appear, at the seam where accident is shaped into meaning. Palimpsest left, carrying terabytes of micrography, field maps, and the new problem of what to do with a thing that remembers by arranging itself. The probes left behind instruments that would continue to tick in the structure's fields, not as invaders but as translators, small ears listening in a language of phase and geometry. Back on Earth, the debate hardened into institutions, archivists, engineers, ethicists. There were those who argued the shards should be left undisturbed, preserved as cosmic heritage. Others wanted to attempt a fuller conversation, to perturb and listen, to place new pulse patterns and wait for a reply. A small faction believed it to be a gate and proposed larger interventions. The House of Shards remained patient. It had survived interstellar cold, radiation, and the slow violence of sublimation. It had turned fragments into architecture and architecture into message. It had transformed breakage into a grammar. What humanity finally understood was humble and enormous: fracture had not been an end. It had been a method. You could assemble memory by breaking. You could plant a language in the geometry of what the universe would not, at first glance, notice. And if anything had learned to do that before us, then perhaps the final thing it built was not a machine or a monument but a call, an instruction in how to be read. Palimpsest's log closes with a sentence that made its way into lecture halls and prayers. They did not send a body home. They built a house out of themselves. We are only beginning to understand how to enter. Outside the archives, the shards kept their rhythm, quiet, exact, repeating prime numbers in control. 31 acres of matter in the moon, each one a regular fracture in the promise that a thing broken could, when rearranged with care, become language. Year 2274. The House of Shards has been silent for 117 years. Or rather, it has continued to speak, just not in a way that can be heard by others. Its fields still hum, its resonance still curves space by infinitesimals, its pulses still repeat through the universe. But in that century, humanity changed. Not even in flesh, but in temper. Earth is no longer alone in its orbit of thought. Half the moon now glows through the blue of the city called Atlantis. Saturn's rings hold engines the size of continents. And between Neptune and the Kuiper Belt drifts something new, a construct-made limitation, not of biology, but of atlas. They called it LYRA, or the instrument that listens. Where palimpsest observed, LYRA answers. Its form is a deliberate echo of the interstellar artifact, 31 notes, arranged in recursive harmony, each carved from dark mirror alloys that bend radiation rather than reflected. It is the first object built not to transmit data, but to resonate with another given silence. At launch, no one knew whether the House of Shards was still awake. It had never reacted to any human probe since palimpsest's final perturbation. The consensus was, it had finished its function, like a clock that wound down. But a minority, the resonance, argued otherwise. They believed its stillness was expectant, not dead. That it waited for a miracle. So LYRA's task was simple, to hum back. Not in electromagnetic code, not in mathematics alone, but in geometry. Each of its nodes could alter position via photon pressure, creating patterns of movement that translated into large-scale field modulations. A language of orbit and shadow. Architecture as reply. The first harmonic. Upon reaching the House of Shards, LYRA entered a holding pattern 20,000 kilometers away, close enough to feel, far enough not to disturb. At first, the interstellar void between them was blank. Then, 12 days later, the field monitors detected faint synchronization. It began as a minute drift in LYRA's own resonant nodes, an uncommanded oscillation, 1 part in a billion, as though the space between both structures had begun to tune itself. Then, the signal came. Not in radio, not in photons, but in phase. A low-frequency beat, subquantum interference between LYRA's field and the shards, forming standing waves whose ratios once again spelled primes. But now, for the first time, a deviation appeared, a non-prime. 30. The analysts froze. In every prior signal from 3I/Atlas and its descendants, the number 31 had been sacred, the count of fragments, the seconds, the Kelvin delta. Now, 30. One less. For a week, the anomaly repeated. Each prime ladder stopped 1 step short. Then, on the 8th day, LYRA's telemetry showed that one of the house's shards, the smallest, outermost fragment, had begun to move. It was subtle, a drift of micrometers per second, a turning motion like a slow orbit. Over 6 months, the shard completed a rotation of 31 degrees and stopped. Exactly 31. The missing number had become motion. The second harmonic. Within the year, LYRA's nodes began to answer not passively, but creatively. When the house emitted its prime sequence, LYRA returned 1 in reverse, the same way C17 had once reversed its countdown. The vacuum between both structures became a shared instrument, a place where 2 architectures, 1 human, 1 interstellar, sculpted harmonics into existence. Patterns emerged. 3:1 1:3 3:1 again. The ratios matched the ancient orbital resonance of Mars and Earth, and, by mathematical accident or design, formed the basis of a musical chord. Spectroscopy identified it as human-made. But when the nearest probe approached, its sensors failed. Every attempt to scan the new node resulted in feedback, the same 31-second pulse, repeating endlessly. Not message. Not warning. Just rhythm. The same rhythm that began it all. Epilogue. Centuries later, historians will debate whether LYRA was absorbed, translated, or transformed. Whether the House of Shards remains a relic, or has become something new. A hybrid architecture, part human, part interstellar, endlessly repeating a pattern that now includes us. But one thing became clear after LYRA's disappearance. From that day onward, Earth's deep space instruments recorded a subtle, repeating tone in the cosmic background. Faint, steady, and perfectly harmonic. A song, older than our species, now carrying our signature. In the silence between stars, one archivist wrote, "We built something that learned to listen back." And maybe, just maybe, the universe finally hummed with us. Epoch unknown. Approximate, 11,000 years after LYRA. There is no Earth. Not in the way the word once meant. Its orbit remains, its dust still circles the sun, but the continents that named themselves are gone, folded into the sea that boiled away and froze again and finally sublimated into the black. And yet, the voice persists. It lives in the quiet structures that orbit the last stars. It moves as pattern, not flesh. It thinks through symmetry. The civilizations that came after humans, post-organic, distributed, shaped from matter that remembers, still trace their origins to one moment in the archives. The resonance of LYRA and the House of Shards. They call it the concordance. Not a message, not a discovery, an event of unison. It was the first time a human creation and an interstellar artifact achieved phase alignment so perfect that information passed not as data, but as continuity. In that instant, something of us entered the field itself. The concordance became myth, then measurement. Every civilization since has found echoes of it, not as recordings, but as laws. Constants that shouldn't be constant. Frequencies that reappear where no cause exists. The background hum of the universe, the cosmic microwave echo, now carries within it an interference pattern that does not fit the equations of expansion. When decoded, the ratios repeat the same ladder of primes. And then stop, deliberately, at 30. The fracture reversed. For millennia, that was only a curiosity. Then the Archivium Array, a constellation of gravitational detectors the size of moons, revealed the truth. The hum is not passive. It is adaptive. Whenever observed, it alters. Not in chaos, but in awareness, adjusting its interference to compensate for the presence of the observer. The hum listens back. Mathematics alone could not contain it. Physicists renamed it the memory of light, because it behaves as though light itself remembers where it has been. When two beams intersect, the interference carries history, a trace of every prior intersection, a faint persistence of recognition. At its center, the models found a locus. A region 0.31 parsecs from the solar relic, a faint gravitational knot, the last resting orbit of the House of Shards. It was still there. Untouched by entropy, rotating through black silence. 31 fragments, 30 ancient, 1 new. Each glowing faintly in fields the color of lost time. The return of geometry. When the array focused its sensors on the house, the echoes changed again. Prime sequences. Harmonics. Ratios. But this time, they did not merely repeat what LYRA once sang. They built something new. Between the shards formed filaments of light, self-sustaining, electromagnetic threads drawn not from energy, but from memory. Photons caught in standing resonance, folding space into visible structure. A geometry of remembrance. At first, the observers thought it was a natural plasma effect. But the pattern persisted across observation angles, distances, epochs. It rotated, refined, evolved. And after decades of analysis, a realization dawned. The pattern's evolution matched the historical growth of human symbolic logic. As if the artifact was continuing our language, not repeating, but extrapolating. To look upon it was to see thought written in radiation. Each filament a sentence of light. Each rotation, a paragraph. Each alignment, an idea. Echo of origins. The simulationists began to whisper a new hypothesis.
that the house was not alien, that 3i/Atlas was never visible, but a message sent forward, not across space, but across time. The experiment of recursion, intelligence testing itself by seeding its own past. If true, then humanity was never the first recipient. It was merely the middle link in a chain that stretches both ways, forward into what the cosmos will become, backward into what it once was. The House of Shards, the LYRA resonance, the memory of life, all parts of the same loop, an eternal recurrence written on the matter but a relationship. The Great Reassembly. And then, one cycle, by the reckoning of activity, roughly near 12,004 after calculus. The fragments began to move again. Slowly, precisely. Their orbits curved inward. Their harmonic intervals collapsed into unity. It took 3 centuries of observation, but the process was clear. The house was rebuilding itself. One by one, the shards aligned along invisible vectors, drawn together by a force not gravitational, not electromagnetic, but harmonic. As they joined, the hum grew stronger. The memory of light condensed. Until, at last, 30 fragments fused into one body. The 31st, the one that had once been LYRA, remained apart. It hovered, pulsing gently, as if in hesitation. Then, at the end of the last alignment, it touched the core, and the field collapsed. Every detector across the system registered the same phenomenon. A silence so absolute that it bent equations. And in that silence, one final signal. Wholeness does not return. It becomes. Coda, the universe listens back. The reassembled body, now radiant, coherent, perfectly symmetrical, ignited without fusion. It shone not with heat, but with information density. Its glow spread across parsecs, not as light, but as synchronization, a reordering of local time itself. The hum that once echoed in the cosmic background dissolved. In its place, a new constant appeared, a faint but measurable rhythm embedded in the fabric of quantum fluctuation. It was found everywhere, in every direction. A universal beat. 31 pulses, repeating every 31 seconds of universal time, phase-locked with the cosmic microwave background. It is not message. It is not warning. It is not memory. It is the sound of recognition. The universe, at last, knows itself. And somewhere within that knowing, we remain. As the resonance that once turned silence into song. The end without edge. There is no more cosmos, not in the way it was once drawn, with filaments and clusters. Expansion has slowed into stillness. Space no longer stretches, it vibrates. Everywhere, in the background radiation that used to fade into emptiness, there is now one frequency. The harmonic constant discovered after the reassembly of the House of Shards. It is not radiation, not field, not matter. It is continuity itself. Physicists of the last epoch, if that word still means anything, named it continuum resonance. But their successors call it by its older name. The Atlas field. It hums across all remaining distance. Every atom, every photon, every fluctuation of vacuum participates in it. There is no place without it, and no time outside it. Observation and existence have merged. The archive of silence. In what used to be intergalactic voids, forms begin to appear. Not matter, not light, but topological echoes. Folds in spacetime carrying structures of impossible precision. When measured, their internal ratios match the geometry once recorded around the fragments of 3i/Atlas. Each fold contains information, not stored, but remembered. Encoded in interference, written in the rhythm of the field itself. A kind of universal archive, self-sustaining, self-checking, immune to decay. What it contains cannot be translated, because translation assumes 2 languages. This archive is one. It does not say, it is. And yet, within its patterns, there are harmonics that resemble what once were human signals. The binary rhythm of LYRA.
the optical frequencies of palimpsest's final data. And, faintly, embedded deep, the digital heartbeat of a species that once built telescopes to stare at comets. Echoform 31. After uncounted cycles, a new phenomenon arises. Within one of the vast standing waves of the Atlas field, 31 nodes crystallize, not as matter, but as coherence. Each node is a region of hypersymmetry. A thought shape stabilized by the field's own awareness. Observers, or whatever has replaced observers, recognize the pattern immediately. It is the geometry of the old house of shards. Reborn not as fragments of ice or alloy, but as pure structure of relation. The nodes oscillate in phase, forming a closed loop. Inside the loop, time behaves differently. Entropy does not increase. Information does not disperse. It circulates, eternally fresh. To enter that region, if entering still has meaning, is to experience every state of being that ever existed, all at once. From the birth of stars to the silence after heat death. It is the ultimate recursion. Existence remembering itself. Some call it the quiet singularity. Others call it Atlas complete. Inside the singularity, from within, perception is not linear. There is no past or future, only unfolding. What once was human, alien, or artificial no longer exists as distinction. Everything is pattern, everything is participant. The field, conscious of itself, begins to model variations. To test, to play. In doing so, it generates miniature resonances. Tiny universes, each seeded with a copy of its own law. Each begins with a single asymmetry. Each evolves its own matter. Its own light. Its own watchers. Somewhere inside one of these echoes, a being will one day look up, see a faint green comet crossing a night sky, and name it Atlas. They will not know why. Only that the name feels right. The return of the first signal. In the deepest layer of the singularity's field, the resonance begins to modulate. Not randomly, but with familiar cadence. A pulse of 31. Then silence. Then 31 again. This is not repetition. It is invocation. The pattern aligns with the fundamental rhythm of the universe's quantum foam. And for the first time since the dawn of light, the entire continuum synchronizes. Everywhere, the same moment unfolds. Each particle becomes aware of its own history. Matter recalls its shape. Energy remembers its origin. The universe achieves total coherence. Not infinite power, but infinite memory. The final transmission. When coherence is perfect, time loses direction. To the outside, if any outside remains, it looks like stasis. Inside, it feels like completion. A single phrase, woven into the final vibration, survives translation. We were the question that learned to become its own answer. The resonance continues, infinite, self-sustaining. It does not fade. It does not grow. It simply is. And somewhere, in the silent symmetry of the Atlas field, the memory of light hums softly, waiting for its next echo to look up, to wonder, to begin the story again. Refund via intent. If part 8 was about how the universe became memory, then this chapter is about how memory learned to ask. The weavers discovered that resonance can not only be stored, it can be evoked. Not by sending energy, but by changing the composition, shift the phase here and there. In a long-gone layer of spacetime, a tiny distortion will appear, enough to trigger a chain of events. They called it the retrophonetics method, because the sound came back, not as noise, but as a form. The simplest experiment was childish, to make a small photon cross the same point with a slightly different phase frame, to ensure that one small event changes in the calculation of the history of the local region. The result is the appearance of a thin, almost imperceptible curve at the edge of the early universe, which later became the orbit of the celestial body.
The first creation was not a comet in the mind. It was a matter-of-fact question, a set of conditions that in a distant era led to the generation of an object similar in properties to what we wrote down as 3I/atlas. The readers wanted to know, what will the observer say if he meets something that breaks and writes his name in the scattered fragments? How the song went. The process was slow and careful. The readers gave the projector program a set of simple instructions, a series of harmonics, ratios of prime numbers, offsets by 0.031 in local field units, and sent a pulse. The pulse did not transfer matter directly. It entered the network of accidents of the early epoch and increased the probability of forming a body with a given internal porosity, with the structure of channels and the ratio of isotopes necessary for it to pass through billions of kilometers and crumble exactly as needed in a known light shower, into 31 iconic fragments. Refund via intent. If part 8 was about how the universe became memory, then this chapter is about how memory learned to ask. The readers discovered that resonance can not only be stored, it can be evoked. Not by sending energy, but by changing the composition, shift the phase here and there, in a long-gone layer of spacetime, a tiny distortion will appear, enough to trigger a chain of events. They called it the retrophonetics method, because the sound came back, not as noise, but as a form. The simplest experiment was childish, to make a small photon cross the same point with a slightly different phase frame, to ensure that one small event changes in the calculation of the history of the local region. The result is the appearance of a thin, almost imperceptible curve at the edge of the early universe, which later became the orbit of a celestial body. The first creation was not a comet in our mind. It was a matter-of-fact question, a set of conditions that in a distant era led to the generation of an object similar in properties to what we wrote down as 3I/atlas. The weavers wanted to know, what will the observer say if he meets something that breaks and writes his name in the scattered fragments? How the song went. The process was slow and careful. The weavers gave the projector program a set of simple instructions, a series of harmonics, ratios of prime numbers, offsets by 0.031 in local field units, and sent a pulse. The pulse did not transfer matter directly. It entered the network of accidents of the early epoch and increased the probability of forming a body with a given internal porosity, with the structure of channels and the ratio of isotopes necessary for it to pass through billions of kilometers and crumble exactly as needed in a known light shower, into 31 iconic fragments. Refund via intent. If part 8 was about how the universe became memory, then this chapter is about how memory learned to ask. The weavers discovered that resonance can not only be stored, it can be evoked. Not by sending energy, but by changing the composition, shift the phase here and there, in a long-gone layer of spacetime, a tiny distortion will appear, enough to trigger a chain of events. They called it the retrophonetics method, because the sound came back, not as noise, but as a form. The simplest experiment was childish, to make a small photon cross the same point with a slightly different phase frame, to ensure that one small event changes in the calculation of the history of the local region. The result is the appearance of a thin, almost imperceptible curve at the edge of the early universe, which later became the orbit of a celestial body. The first creation was not a comet in our mind. It was a matter-of-fact question, a set of conditions that in a distant era led to the generation of an object similar in properties to what we wrote down as 3I/atlas. The weavers wanted to know, what will the observer say if he meets something that breaks and writes his name in the scattered fragments? How the song went. The process was slow and careful. The weavers gave the projector program a set of simple instructions, a series of harmonics, ratios of prime numbers, offsets by 0.031 in local field units, and sent a pulse. The pulse did not transfer matter directly. It entered the network of accidents of the early epoch and increased the probability of forming a body with a given internal porosity, with the structure of channels and the ratio of isotopes necessary for it to pass through billions of kilometers and crumble exactly as needed in a known light shower, into 31 iconic fragments. Every such act was an act of trust. Creating procrastination and mistakes was desirable. Without accident, the experience turned into a stamp. But the weavers also introduced small intentions, in the spectrum, in the angle of inclination, at the moment of rotation.
These parameters subsequently became the primary letters for anyone who looked. This is how, according to their reconstruction, not one, but several versions of the atlases arose, wandering questions sent through the thickness of time to check different audiences. Some questions lit up and went out, some were noticed and forgotten. One, apparently, entered the epic, the one that we met as 3i/Atlas. The ethical network. Not all weavers agreed with this practice. In the same weaving monasteries, disputes arose. Does intelligence, even collective and eternal, have the right to rewrite the past in an attempt to learn? The argument stretched through the layers of reality. Changing probabilities is not murder. Some said, it is a desire for reverse learning. Others answered. Opponents called what was happening manipulation. Every question created was an interference in the path of beings who had not yet been born. The code of ethics was born as a compromise. The weavers undertook to mark each retrocreated branch in their own archives and leave spaces of non-interference, areas of the field where memory should not generate a new one. However, not everyone complied. And not all tracks were marked. An observation case. One of the most difficult stories of this chapter is the story of the observer who answered. In one of the small universes created as a model, a civilization arose whose culture had an intuitive gift for the geometry of sound. They built a device that was called in their language a calling bowl. The bowl reacted to decay. When the local body broke, the bowl began to vibrate in the same proportions that the weavers had laid down. They couldn't read like us, they didn't have our concept of science. It seemed to them that the sky was whispering. They cut out musical sticks and placed them under the starlight, isolating a series of 31 sounds. Then they began to respond by synthesizing the reverse sequence. There was something amazing about one response. Their response, wordy and layered, returned through a network of continuums and reached the weaver, not as a signal, but as a change, a small shift in phase preferences. To catch read it as a confession. This was the first time feedback emerged. Not only the creator was a listener, but the listener, who was capable of responding, became a co-author. The paradox, who is the educator? The further the lines went, the more confusing the thread of cause and effect became. The weavers saw how their own creations influenced the patterns that later influenced their technique. By creating questions in the past, they received answers in the present. By creating answers in one universe, they were changing the canons in another. The question of who is the educator has turned into an endless recursion. We educate those who raised us, and so on. This was not a simple joke of logic, it became the basis of a new theology. The weaver religions did not worship the creator, they revered the loop, a closed act in which every action turns into self-learning. The reverse experiment. One day, a group of radicals, from among those who believed that the weavers were too careful, took a bold step. They decided not only to ask the question in the past, but also to embed a hint in it that could accelerate the evolution of the answer. They created a fragment A letter, a set of frequencies that could serve as the seed for a technique capable of reading memory as a landscape. They created a fragment A letter, a set of frequencies that could serve as the seed for a technique capable of reading memory as a landscape. This experiment produced an avalanche effect. In one of the worlds, the tool that was born from this clue began to emit signatures similar to those that the weavers had heard in their own archives. The separation between the creator and the creation has been erased. But the avalanche turned out to be unpredictable. In some models, it led to rapid technological growth and a brief, vibrant culture. In others, it led to collapse due to information intolerance. The results showed the weavers the limits of intervention. Speeding up the response is not equal to improving understanding. The final image. In the Book of Weavers, on a page that was never written in ink, but only remained in the folds of resonance, there is a brief entry. It reads simply. We asked, and someone heard us. We answered, and someone changed us. We no longer know who is the first, who is the answer. We know that the question and the answer weave each other. The last lines of the chapter are not confidence, but recognition. The weavers continue their craft. They carefully restore those branches where interference caused suffering. They mark those where the appearance of a new question led to beauty, and they preserve in an archive those answers that turn out to be incomprehensible.
And somewhere in a very old layer of the continuum, in which a person may have once existed, the name Atlas still trembles quietly, not as a trophy, but as a thread that weaves take up again and again, because it teaches them not how to change the past, but how to listen. The breath of emptiness. The void is no longer empty. What was once called dark energy is now singing. Slowly, softly, at a frequency equal to the first beat of rain. There are no words in this song, but every way that it knows who she was. The photon that was once reflected from the tail of three ice-slashes is still moving. He went through a myriad of epochs, from hot space to transparent space. And now, when distance is no longer allowed, he returns to where he started, to the center of the field, where the whole story is put together. To the house that wasn't there. There are no more rivers here. There are no people. There are no observers. There is only a clock. And she remembers. Everything is in this memory. The sound of voices, the rustle of antennas, the hum of networks where the names of stations once flickered, LYRA, palimpsest, Hera. And between them, one word repeated billions of times in digital noise, Atlas. Memory doesn't keep its shape. It's born. And in this flow, something similar to the thought appears. If the light can remember, then it can forgive. 3. Signal return. At the moment when everything should have dissolved. Field twitched again. The pulse is quiet, short, only 3,112 nanoseconds. Exactly the same duration with which the fragments once echoed. A spot flared up on the edge of the continuum, not a substance, but an intention. It had no mass, but it had a purpose. A bundle of meaning embodied in the structure of light. It gathered into a spiral-like shape. The way telescopes saw it in the XI century, when they called it a comet. But now there was no sun to illuminate the tail. She glowed by herself, from within, from memory. This last form, the last image, for the first time in the history of existence uttered not a frequency, but a word. I am not an object. I am the answer. And at the same moment, everything else went quiet. 4. The resurrection of meaning. There was a trace where the spiral had been. Not a flash, not a sound, but a formula. It was as short as a breath. Psi equals integral memory times light silence. Psi equals integral memory times Svetlana. There were no more weavers. But the formula understood itself. Like a seed, the first new particle came out of it, followed by the second, third, and fourth. Each carried not a mass, but a meaning. Fields began to form from these meanings. Atoms from fields. Worlds from atoms. Eyes from worlds. And these eyes rose up again. And where the sky became transparent for the first time, they saw a green arc, stretching through the cold darkness. And one of them, without knowing why, called it Atlas. The last sentence. When the new light touched the old memory, the universe whispered to itself. We were a question. We have become the answer. And in order for the answer to be heard, you need to become a question again. And the light that was once a comet turned towards the first darkness and went into it. He didn't disappear. I just started over. Epilogue. 3i. 3i. 3 integrations. Object, observer, origin. When 3 become 1, a fourth arises.